Micro Forte planned Fallout Tactics to be a massive post-apocalyptic adventure, but they only had 15 months to develop it, and many of their ideas never made it into the final game. This is the cut content of Fallout Tactics Part 1. One of Tactics' most iconic elements are its vehicles. There's only 6 drivable vehicles in the campaign, but there were plans for at least one more. An image of an armored bus was shown off early in development, but never appeared. The level design in Tactics has obstacles everywhere that would get in the way of a vehicle this large, so cutting this bus might have been the right decision. Tactics didn't need more vehicles as much as it needed more missions where you can actually use them. There's a cut perk called Twitch Gamer, and its Vault Boy image still remains. Level designer Gareth Davies revealed how it would have worked in a forum post. Twitch Gamer, a perk that the player could gain from playing the mini-game that was planned for the Pit Boy. Needless to say, it wasn't implemented. When the Twitch appears above the player's head, it's supposed to give the player action an AP cost of 0, effectively giving you a free action. This perk and the way you gained it were both cool ideas, and while they never made it into Tactics, Pit-Boy minigames would eventually be added in Fallout 4 nearly 15 years later. There's 2 other cut perks called Bend the Rules and Break the Rules. Both perks required a luck of 6 and would have become available at level 16 and level 20 respectively. Choosing Bend the Rules would have allowed that character to pick any perk available to their race on their next level up. Break the Rules would have allowed that character to pick any perk on their next level up, regardless of race or other requirements. I like the concept of sacrificing a perk to gain one you normally wouldn't have access to, and this could have led to some crazy character builds. They're shown in the game's manual and must have been cut very late in development. Early information provided on Interplay's website mentioned something very interesting: player death. A new dying stage gives the members of the squad a chance to revive their fallen comrade. There is no dying stage though, and if the player dies at any point during the campaign, you're forced to reload to an earlier save. This could have led to some dramatic moments where your squad had to lay down cover fire to protect a medic as they try to revive the dying player. It would have encouraged a more reckless playstyle that could have really improved the combat system. In the Osceola mission, you can find an item called Barnaky's Letter, and it's a letter from General Barnaky to his wife Maria. Despite being referred to as a letter, it uses the image for a holodisk, and that's because it was originally intended to play a recording. General Barnaky's lines were recorded by the late great Lee Ermey, and his voice acting is one of my favorite aspects of Fallout Tactics. This item is actually one of only 2 ways to avoid killing General Barnaky later in the campaign. Interestingly, this dialogue has the only mention of his first name, Simon.
My dearest Maria, although it pains me to record this, I must continue. Time is short and my future is less than certain. I'm currently captured and held prisoner by a large group of super mutants, and I don't believe that I'm going to make it back this time. But once again, time is short, and I'll use it to tell you what is important. I love you, Maria. I've loved you since we first met, and I love you even more 50 years since. We were always much alike, you and I. And know that I would never have had the courage to fight for humanity without you faithfully by my side. For in the end, I realize I did it all for you. For I wanted nothing more but to restore order to this chaotic world so you can live a life free of danger, free of fear, free of ungodly mutations. I'm afraid I'm out of time. I'll make every attempt to fix this world for you, my love. I promise. Love eternal. Simon Barnaky.
You can find another holodisk during the same mission, but its description gives no information about its content, and you can never listen to its recording. Recovering it changes the debriefing dialogue and reveals it's the Journal of Sir Latham. During this section of the campaign, you fight against a faction of super mutants led by a mysterious figure called Gomorrin. It's later revealed that Gomorrin is a long-lost member of the Brotherhood, Paladin Latham. It's never explained how Latham became the leader of the super mutants or took the name Gomorrin, but this cut dialogue shows his descent into madness and would have made him into a more interesting antagonist. This was recorded by voice actor Dwight Schultz, who also voiced Hakunin and Knight Captain Cade. He did an awesome job with these lines, and it's probably the best voice acting in the entire game. Tactics doesn't have that much recorded dialogue, and I think this might be the longest monologue outside of the intro/ending slides.
Journal of Sir Latham, entry 10.1.4. We have crash-landed north of a camp occupied by super mutants. We believe these to be the remnants of the Master's army as encountered by the first Vault Dweller. Although the archives mentioned that some of these super mutants might actually be friendly, we found little to like about these ones, especially the chief. The leader of this camp went by the name of Gomorrin. We were set upon by his patrols. Soon after we pulled ourselves from the wreckage, bound and gagged, the mutant guards dragged us back to their camp. Fully half of us had been killed by the crash, and now less than half of that survived the treatment of our mutant captors. We were scheduled to be killed for the amusement of Gomorrin. It was not hard to see that several of the super mutants were unhappy with this. In fact, I was amazed to discover that they were not as savage as I had previously been led to believe. I challenged Gomorrin to single, unarmed combat. It was to the death. There could be no other outcome in my mind. If I die, it will be in combat. Journal of Sir Latham, entry 0.0.1. I am awake. To tell the truth, I remember little of the battle. The gash on my head, along with multiple fractures and breaks, paint an adequate picture. However, the mutants are now expecting me to lead them, since I laid Gomorrin to rest. I will record more later. I fear my brain has been set awry by the fight. I will try to rest until I can think clearly. Journal of Sir Latham, entry 0.5.8. The super mutants are a simple but good people. While considered stupid by many, they show a loyalty stronger than I've seen in many humans. They live life the only way they know how. I've begun to organize these mutant forces with a handful of fellow humans who survived the crash. I have recovered physically, but I find myself prone to mysterious fits of anger and depression. But much worse are the hallucinations. Journal of Sir Latham, entry 1.4.5. Today is a day filled with absolute horror. Only one mutant returned from a scouting trip that was 10 soldiers strong. He staggered back to camp and collapsed without a sound. He died in my arms while trying to hold back the blood pouring from his mouth. Before I had a chance to close his eyes, the menace was upon us. Metallic death machines entered the camp undetected by my sentries. I've never seen creatures such as this before, but they seemed unstoppable. It was only the sheer power, and more importantly, our numbers, that allowed us to defeat these 3 machinations of death. Our losses were staggering. Journal of Sir Latham, entry 1.8.2. We are resting now. Humans and mutants alike hanging their heads and trying to catch their breath. Who knows how far we've retreated? 20 miles, 40 even. Once we put enough distance between us and this menace from the west, then we can regroup and plan a counterstrike. Journal of Sir Latham, entry 2.3.4. I am not well. This morning, I thought I was attacked by a death claw. Too far from my SMG, I lashed out with my ripper, slashing the beast's throat. My vision cleared in time to see Nathan the scribe's eyes go cloudy, his neck in ruin. his blood covering my hands. How can I go mad when humanity is in such dire peril? I must maintain my sanity. I must. Journal of Sir Latham, entry 2.4.2. My scouts engaged an enemy today. The sound of chain guns and explosions hasting my steps. What I observed in that fight changed me to the core of my being. My mutant scouts were engaged by a Brotherhood patrol. For the first time in my life, I was frozen in battle. I watched, curious even, tribal-looking Brotherhood soldiers laughing maniacally as they cut down my new companions. My mutant companions who dedicated their life to me as their leader. I lifted my weapon then, and I fired again and again. And when it was over, with Brotherhood corpses littering the ground, my head suddenly cleared. I now know my purpose, and more importantly, I finally know who I am. I am Gomorrin, sworn enemy of the menace from the west.
Notably, there are 10 holotapes referenced in the item text file, but the 2 we looked at are the only ones placed in the world. There are several major plot elements that aren't explained well, and it seems the developers planned to use holodisks to flesh out the story, but it sadly wasn't meant to be. During the Kansas City mission, you meet a cult of ghouls who worship a nuclear warhead. There's another cut holotape named Prophecy, and it likely would have been found inside their cathedral. A note in the dialogue file of the mission reads, "Ed, look at this and put it on a disc or tablet." This message would never get placed anywhere, however, and its lines were never recorded. On the 16th day of vomiting, Saint Harold commanded that those followers closest to Platonius shall not engage the heathens of the land. For those so close to achieving an understanding of the fire, one cannot see must remain pure of energy-absorbing poisons. Prayer will replace clenched fist with heavenly belief as your shield. Until the great hydro-mechanical reckoning, you will abide by this. Until your pagan brothers return to their home ready for the final battle, so it is written, so it shall be done, Saint Harold of the Leafy Scalp. This is a reference to Harold, that guy who was exposed to FEV, and then Bethesda turned him into a fucking tree. One of the NPCs in Kansas City has the line, "Have you seen Harold around lately?" This is sadly the only remnant of Harold being worshipped as a saint. He actually appears in Tactics as one of the potential recruits though. Forte developed most of the game, but Interplay handled some aspects like recording all of the voiceovers. Harold was voiced by Charlie Adler in the first 2 games, and considering Interplay brought back previous actors like Ron Perlman, it's possible he would have reprised his role again. All of this would have been a great homage to the classic games, so it's a shame it got axed. Many characters have unused background information about them in Tactics text files. It's common practice to write backstories for characters during development, but these are typically never seen outside of leaked design documents. It's really cool this is left over, and there's lore in them that's never told to the player. For example, Defcon's background reads, Defcon is the second son of T-. He is the spiritual leader of the ghouls of Gravestone. He is a particularly leathery ghoul, and like Harold, grows a little bonsai out the back of his head. As such, it is possible for Defcon to hand the hammer over to a worthy cause. It is of little matter, for the Almighty will provide them with another one. There is a stockpile of nuclear weapons buried beneath Gravestone. This isn't cut content since it was never meant to be seen by the player, but I find lost lore like this absolutely fascinating. There's cut recorded dialogue for an Acolyte NPC who was also meant to appear in Kansas City. There are several Acolytes standing next to Defcon, and one of them was likely meant to say these lines. This Acolyte's character image seems to be missing, though it might have been recycled for an existing NPC. He has 2 lines, and it seems his dialogue would be different if the player had ghoul recruits in their party.
Thank the positively charged particles of Plutonius. It must have been his electron-sharing intervention. I must divulge a secret to you about the ghoul race. You must understand that acolytes like us can only join the battle when the prophecy is fulfilled. You must be our defense and aid, my brothers. The rest of us can only watch and pray. What is this? Our brethren have joined the Brotherhood. Us acolytes are forbidden to take up arms until the prophecy is fulfilled. We were taught that acolyte ghouls are beings of light, and that we will turn to smoking ash if we raise our hands in anger. That is why we only watch. But my brothers here are warriors who come from afar. I see it before my own 3 eyes. This means the prophecy is complete. We won't turn to ash. We can help defend our beliefs. We will not watch. We will act.
Much of the Kansas City mission revolves around defending Gravestone from a super mutant attack that comes in several waves. A developer note reads, "Ed, how about setting the trigger of the first attack a couple minutes after he talks to DEF CON? This way the player will have some time to look around." This suggests the attack wasn't supposed to happen until after the player speaks to DEF CON, but in the final game the attack happens a few seconds after starting the mission regardless of what you do. Cuts like this really illustrate just how rushed the game's development was. You may have noticed the notes we've looked at mention someone named Ed, and these were written to lead designer Ed Orman. Forte had a very small team of less than 30 people on Tactics, and as a result, many of the developers did a wide variety of work on the project. So not only did Ed Orman design many elements of missions, but he also drew most of the Pip-Boy images, and I really dig some of the art he made. During the Junction City mission, the player needs to recover the parts of a destroyed robot. You can buy one of the parts from a character named Chuck, but when you check it out on your menu, its description reads, "This is a fake. Its components aren't robotic, but an antique cooking device, an electronic mixer or blender, and a vibrating sex toy. You have been duped." Chuck was meant to taunt the player if they bought the item, but this line isn't used in the final game.
Yeah, I sold you my robot piece. So what? I have a strict no-return policy, dickhead. What are you gonna do? You gonna shoot me in public? You're not that stupid, are you? Plus, I got my boys with me. You wanna buy a vault next? Go skull fuck yourself, jawhead.
There's also a second unused version of the line, as they strangely recorded censored and uncensored dialogue for many of Junction City's NPCs.
Yeah, I sold you my robot piece. So what? I have a strict no-return policy, moron. What are you gonna do? You gonna shoot me in public? You're not that stupid. Plus, I got my boys with me. You wanna buy a vault next? Go skull kick yourself, jawhead.
Notably, he mentions his boys, suggesting he was meant to have guards, but there's no one else around. Finally, there was meant to be a line in the debriefing if you bought the fake robot part, but it was set up incorrectly and never plays.
Brother, I'm afraid one of the villagers has played you for a fool. One of the items you brought back was not a robot piece of machinery, but a sloppily put-together contraption. The scribes report that its components aren't robotic, but an antique toaster cooking device, an electronic mixer or blender, and a vibrating sex toy. You understand that it's not the value of the item that is the issue here, but the public image of the Brotherhood. This normally would not go unpunished, but we are too short of personnel to settle this matter. Try not to embarrass us again. Dismiss.
Notes reveal that the developer's intention was for the player to hear the debriefing and then return to kill Chuck, even stating there are no repercussions because everyone knows he's a swindler. None of this is communicated to the player since those lines were cut though. It seems Forte wanted to include content that justified revisiting locations, but unfortunately this is the only instance of reactivity I'm aware of, and it doesn't work. Some files refer to Junction City as Junk Haven, which seems to be an early name for the location. The exact moment its name was decided on is preserved in the game files forever and reads, "Junk Haven, I've got this down as Junction City everywhere else. Can we keep it that way? Yes, Yes, we can. DL. DL is likely the initials of one of Tactics designers/writers, Dan Levin, and I love getting to see commentary like this. These changes, particularly the holodisks dialogue, would have made Fallout Tactics into an even better game. Ultimately though, all of this was left on the cutting room floor.